Nobody likes lies, and most often most of us feel when the interlocutor does not say something or is outright lying. Some immediately make it clear that they do not believe the interlocutor and do not need to lie to him, while others listen to lies with interest, and in order not to spoil relationships with a liar for some personal reasons do not show that they saw through the lie. Be that as it may, skillful lying is also a great talent, which only a few people can master. Sometimes this lie is so masterly, large-scale and artistic that it is given the high title of hoax. Today we'll look at the most interesting hoaxes and scams of imposters posing as other people, whose masterly lies no one could figure out for a long time. Good ground for the hoaxes of modern imposters is a celebrity leading a reclusive lifestyle. This is what the British fraudster did, the former owner of a travel agency, who in the 90s of the last century posed as film director Stanley Kubrick, who by the time these events took place had not appeared in public for 15 years. In addition, the American film director had a beard since the late 60s, and Conway was clean-shaven, believing that this would make his deception more difficult to expose. He convinced a number of people in the entertainment industry that he was a famous director, promising them roles and exclusive interviews. For several years, he led the most outrageous lifestyle under the name of a great director. He met vain businessmen who treated him to dinner in expensive restaurants and paid for suites in famous hotels, and everywhere he got drunk at the expense of the establishment. Popular magazines and channels lined up to interview the famous director, paying for every whim from the Impostors writer. He attended the best parties and seduced young actresses with promises of roles in future films. Kubrick's lawyer learned that someone was impersonating the director, and when he told the Kubricks, Stanley was said to be completely enamored with the idea. True, the director's wife, Christian, did not find any charm in the scam and believed that it was absolute horror and a nightmare. Kubrick's personal assistant Anthony Fruin helped track down and capture Conway, who then, based on these events, wrote the script for the film being Stanley Kubrick, filmed in 2005, starring John Malkovich. Conway died of a heart attack on December 5, 1998, shortly before the death of Kubrick, who died in March 1999. Another imposter who went down in history is Ferdinand Waldo Damara, known under the nickname the Great Impostor. During his life he successfully impersonated people of a large number of professions and occupations, from a doctor of psychology and a monk, to a teacher and a military surgeon, and all this without the slightest education in at least one of these fields. Moreover, he did not even finish high school. By falsifying diplomas and documents, Damara got a job, where he most often fulfilled his professional duties with brilliance. Many of the bosses under whom Damara worked were pleased with him, since he had an excellent memory and could remember many necessary things once he read them in a book. For some time he lived a simple life, and then suddenly disappeared as soon as he got bored with work. Several times he faked suicide, after which he changed his name and moved to another place. During his fraudulent career, Damara has worked as a civil engineer, a deputy sheriff, a prison warden, a doctor of psychology, an attorney, a child protective services examiner, an editor, a cancer specialist, a surgeon, and a teacher. Surprisingly, in no case did he seek great material gain. It seemed that Damara was only interested in social status. The most striking episode from his biography is perhaps his service as a military surgeon on a Canadian destroyer during the Korean War. Damara posed as his casual acquaintance, Dr. Joseph Sir. During his service, the improvised surgeon performed dozens of operations, most of which were quite successful. One day, 16 South Korean Marines were brought on board at once with severe wounds. Damara ordered the nurses to prepare them for the operation, while he locked himself in his cabin with a medical reference book and studied the upcoming operations. As a result, all 16 people survived, and the masterly removal of a bullet from the chest, carried out by the brilliant Dr. Sir, even made it into the newspapers. This is what let Damara down. The mother of the real Sir was surprised to read about her son's successes on the destroyer, while he, according to her, succeeded in a completely different place on land. She hastened to report that the article was incorrect and that it was not her son in the photograph, and Damara was exposed. The captain of the destroyer at first did not want to believe that Damara was not a doctor because he did his job excellently, which is why the Canadian Navy did not sue Damara and he returned to the United States. After this incident, He gained great recognition and began to work in various small jobs, without staying anywhere for a long time, as he became known to a large number of people. He continued to live under assumed names, but it became more and more difficult. The book The Great Pretender was written about the life of Ferdinand de Mara in 1960 by Robert Christen, and a film of the same name was shot. Another amazing story happened around the personality of the drummer from the band Kiss, Peter Criss. A homeless man living under the Santa Monica Pier named Chris Dickinson began posing as a famous musician. In the 1970s, Kiss was one of the most popular bands in the world. Drummer Peter Criss, nicknamed Catman, lived up to the rock star lifestyle for several years, going on a rampage that forced him to leave the band in 1980. After which the former Kiss drummer settled down and led a relatively quiet life. But in 1991, Star magazine reported that Peter Criss had become a broke, poor homeless man living under a pier in Santa Monica. And many believed it. The fact is that the face of the real Peter Criss was a mystery to millions of fans because of the original makeup that was on the faces of all the band members. He left the group in 1980, and they decided to abandon the Kiss makeup only in 1983. The famous actor and comedian Tom Arnold believed that the great musician had sunk to such an extent and became homeless, and he decided that this homeless man was really Criss and even provided generous financial assistance to the homeless man. But the rumors turned out to be false, and the real Peter Criss met with the imposter Chris Dickinson on Phil Donahue's popular talk show. It was quite an exciting program with a scandalous exposure of the imposter. In 1996, Criss rejoined his former bandmates and began playing with them again, which led to new albums and tours. The next amazing story happened on April 3, 1817 in a small town in Gloucestershire in England. A strange girl appeared there. She had European features, was dressed in Oriental style and spoke a strange language, and did not understand a word of English. The shoemaker who found her decided that the best place for the strange stranger would be a poor shelter. There she amazed everyone with her strange habits. She slept on the floor, performed some unusual prayer before meals, ate only vegetables and drank only water. Local magistrate Samuel Worrall became interested in the stranger. He took the girl to his home, and his servant, as it turned out, was Greek by birth and spoke several languages, but the girl did not respond to any of them. But when she saw a picture of fruit in the living room, the girl enthusiastically said pineapple. The name of this fruit sounds the same in some Indo-European languages. The girl also said her name caribou. Worrall's wife was fascinated by a romantic stranger who seemed very unhappy. She asked her husband to leave the girl in their house, and she was right. Mrs. Worrall's living room became a place of pilgrimage for various travelers trying to guess the origin of caribou. One day, a Portuguese sailor, Manuel Inesso, appeared on the threshold of that house and said that he understood the girl's speech. He translated her story. The unknown woman's name was Princess Caribou. She was from the island of Yavasu in the Indian Ocean. The girl was allegedly captured by pirates, and in an English port she managed to escape from the ship, after which she exchanged her expensive clothes for food and simpler clothing. Oddly enough, they believed in this almost fairy tale story. The girl really began to be treated like a princess. From that moment on, Caribou became not only a local, but also a London landmark. Portraits were painted from her. Scientific journals tried to decipher the Yavasu language. The house was filled with noble people who wanted to see a foreigner. The princess, meanwhile, fully embraced the role. She ordered herself national clothes with full-length sleeves, swam naked in the garden pond, and climbed onto the roof every day to perform specific religious rituals and prayed to unknown gods. But this could not last long. In fact, the unfortunate Princess Caribou turned out to be a real adventurer named Mary Baker Wilcox. And the Portuguese sailor who translated her language was her old acquaintance and accomplice. She would have fooled those around her for a long time if her portrait in the magazine had not been identified by Mrs. Neal, who had a girlfriend when she worked as a maid. The former mistress claimed that Mary entertained her daughters in a language of her own invention, a mixture of Spanish, Greek, and Gypsy. After several failed attempts to continue impersonating the princess, Mary Baker Wilcox was forced to reveal her true identity. The stunned Whirls hastened to send the imaginary Caribou to the USA, where she again tried to exploit the image of Princess Caribou, but to no avail. After many years of wandering, the woman returned to England, got married, and until the end of her life worked as a supplier of leeches for the Bristol Hospital. The Pope was a woman. One of the most famous medieval legends arose in the mid-13th century, and in the next 2 centuries no one questioned this fact. However, starting in the 15th century, alternative versions arose, and by the mid-16th century, historians began to argue over conjectures. Many actors are convinced that a man can cope well with the role of a woman, but a woman with the role of a man cannot. But the story of a woman who rose to the rank of the Pope refutes this statement. It is known about this unique woman that she was born into the family of a missionary. Quite early, namely at the age of 12, she became friends with a monk from the monastery of Fulda and went with him to Mount Athos, dressed in men's clothing. According to another version, they went to Athens. The girl liked wearing men's clothing so much that, after long wanderings, she got a job as a notary in Rome, then became a cardinal and then was elected pope. However, Joanna did not manage to hold out on the papal throne for long, and she received the title of the most legendary of the impostors. Many historians are convinced that this story is a myth, and Joanna could not have ruled in any way during the periods to which popular rumor persistently attributes her. Well, that's all for today. Thank you all for watching. If it was interesting, support the video with likes. Thank you for subscribing, and take a look at what else we have prepared for you.